The Monroe Doctrine, Trump's vision for the entire Western Hemisphere. I love this cover of the New York Post. And like I've been stating all episode long, truly, during this Christmas season, the best gift President Donald Trump could have gifted to America. Finally, a step in the right direction once again from this administration. Finally, something that is actually going to come across as popular to most American people. This should help his approval rating thoroughly. I am, of course, seeing a lot of panic centered around this doctrine. A lot of people aren't going to like it either, but those are the typical low IQ liberals or old school Republicans, the neocon warmongers, of course. All of the real America First Americans will wind up approving of this new national security strategy overall, and I'm going to explain to you why. But first, I want to briefly show you this. This is a summary of what the Monroe Doctrine was, and you need to understand what this is because this new national security strategy, being dubbed the Monroe Doctrine for a reason, is eerily reminiscent of what the Monroe Doctrine was hundreds of years ago. And the Monroe Doctrine is a United States foreign policy position that opposes European colonialism in the Western Hemisphere. It holds that any intervention in the political affairs of the Americas by foreign powers is a potentially hostile act against the United States. The doctrine was central to American grand strategy in the 20th century. President James Monroe first articulated the doctrine on December 2nd of 1823 during his 7th annual State of the Union address to Congress. Essentially, to make matters very clear, in 1823, President James Monroe decided everything in this Western Hemisphere is established enough and good enough. As the United States, the supreme power of the West, we will no longer tolerate any foreign interference or activity on the Western Hemisphere, and that goes for South America and all of North America, including Canada. And while it specifically cites European countries, it goes for the entirety of the East. And this is just how power works, by the way. The United States truly is the world's greatest superpower, and we truly do operate as an empire. It doesn't matter how much you want to insist civilization has progressed beyond the Middle Ages or before, there are still very real empires in today's world, and the United States is the top tier one. We control the West. We oversee the West. South America, Central America, that's our backyard. And so we need to keep an eye on everything that's happening there, and very rightfully so, as proclaimed in the Monroe Doctrine, any activity from European countries or any country in the East should be looked at as a potential threat to us. Over time, though, we got very lax on this doctrine. We eased up. We didn't want to create unnecessary tensions, and we allowed a lot of countries to get away with way too much. And so that's where the Monroe Doctrine comes back into play. This is an official statement on this from whitehouse.gov, America 250 presidential message on the anniversary of the Monroe Doctrine. This was put out 5 days ago on December 2nd, which was the 202nd anniversary of the Monroe Doctrine. On December 2nd, 1823, the doctrine of American sovereignty was immortalized when President James Monroe declared before the nation a simple truth that has echoed throughout the ages. The United States will never waver in defense of our homeland, our interests, or the well-being of our citizens. Today, my administration proudly reaffirms this promise under a new Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, that the American people, not foreign nations nor globalist institutions, will always control their own destiny in our hemisphere. Not just in our nation, our hemisphere. We control the West. In the centuries since, President Monroe's doctrine of sovereignty has guarded the American continents against communism, fascism, and foreign infringement. And as the 47th President of the United States, I am proudly reasserting this time-honored policy. Since I took office, I have aggressively pursued an America First policy of peace through strength. We restored U.S. privileged access through the Panama Canal. We are reestablishing American maritime dominance. We are disrupting non-market practices in the international supply chain and logistics sectors. And you know, for all the flack that he got for focusing on the Panama Canal and China's control over that, which blatantly was done in opposition to the Monroe Doctrine, it's all starting to make sense. Not to mention President Donald Trump's unique focus on Greenland, which is something I also approve of heavily. I believe America should absolutely acquire Greenland, and I am in favor of Trump's decision to retake the Panama Canal. But it goes on even further than that. My administration is also halting the flow of deadly drugs flowing through Mexico Mexico, ending the invasion of illegal aliens along our southern border, and dismantling narco-terrorist networks all across the Western Hemisphere. To defend our nation's workers and industries, I recently secured historic trade deals with El Salvador, Argentina, Ecuador, and Guatemala, allowing greater and more streamlined market access. I reinvigorated my Trump corollary. The Monroe Doctrine is alive and well, and American leadership is coming roaring back stronger than ever before. Today, we renew our pledge to always uphold American sovereignty, security, and safety first. Above all, we vow to protect our cherished national legacy of Republican self-government against all threats, foreign and domestic. And so, like I said, the best Christmas gift he could have given us, because most importantly, this new Monroe Doctrine, Trump's new national security strategy, officially establishes the Western Hemisphere now as America's #1 foreign policy priority. You can see here it says the United States must reconsider our military presence in the Western Hemisphere. This means 4 obvious things: a readjustment of our global military presence to address urgent threats in our hemisphere, especially the missions identified in this strategy, and away from theaters whose relative import to American national security has declined in recent decades or years. This is, of course, in reference to all of those other foreign wars that we've just had to stick our nose in. The foreign policy of America has been the undoing of both political parties time and time again. Democrats and Republicans alike embrace the same, nearly identical oftentimes, foreign policy when it comes to America policing the world. And young Americans are sick of this because this strategy has been adopted by America for decades now and has ultimately led to no good, tangible results. Regime change doesn't work. Us meddling in other countries' foreign affairs and wars rarely yields the results that we want. Even the ones that Trump has settled has been, in my view, a colossal waste of time. Because I'll be frank with you, as an American, I don't actually give a about the Congo or Rwanda. It's a nice thought to know that President Donald Trump played a major part in establishing peace and ending a 30-year civil war there that resulted in the death of millions of people in the Congo. That's nice. And I know Trump was really vying for that Nobel Peace Prize. He was never going to get it, though. And so now, can we finally stop focusing so much on Israel, Palestine, Ukraine, Russia, Rwanda, Congo, Thailand, Cambodia? That's the messaging here. And essentially, I view this as the Trump administration responding and saying, we hear you, and we're actually going to listen and enact real change. And thank God for that. It goes on to make more bullet points stating a more suitable Coast Guard and Navy presence to control sea lanes, to thwart illegal and other unwanted migration, and to reduce human and drug trafficking, and to control key transit routes in a crisis. It says it targets deployments to secure the border and defeat cartels, including where necessary, the use of lethal force to replace the failed law enforcement only strategy of the last several decades. And it also establishes or expands access in strategically important locations. It then states the United States will prioritize commercial diplomacy to strengthen our own economy and industries, using tariffs and reciprocal trade agreements as powerful tools. The goal is for our partner nations to build up their domestic economies while an economically stronger and more sophisticated Western Hemisphere becomes an increasingly attractive market for American commerce and investment. So to summarize that up super fast, essentially less foreign wars engagement, less sticking our nose in the Eastern Hemisphere, less policing the Eastern Hemisphere, less worrying about Ukraine, Israel, Palestine, Russia, Gaza, Cambodia, Thailand, and more focusing on our Western Hemisphere, more protecting Americans from cartels, more focusing on fortifying America, more focusing on industry here in America, more focusing on fair trade using tariffs. This is such good news. But of course, the Democrats love to tell you how this is going to benefit Russia, and they love pointing to how the Kremlin is celebrating this new national security strategy from President Donald Trump. Vladimir Putin is a much happier guy, I think, after this was announced. You can actually see here in an article from that eastern half of the region, it says the Kremlin says U.S. national security strategy document largely consistent with Russia's vision. Spokesman Peskov says Moscow hopes this could be a modest guarantee that they'll be able to continue joint constructive work on finding settlement in Ukraine. The adjustments we're seeing, I'd say, are largely consistent with our vision, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov told Russian journalist Pavel Zarubin in an interview, a fragment of which was shared shared on his Telegram on Sunday. He further argued that U.S. President Donald Trump's domestic political position is strong, which allows him to adjust the country's national security strategy to suit his vision. Peskov also said that Russia supports the language in the document, which he said contains statements against confrontation and in favor of dialogue and building good relations. And that might freak out so many people, but I got to admit to you right now, I have long been an advocate for America to repair its relationship to Russia. I don't give a damn about Ukraine. The more I study the Russia-Ukraine conflict, the more I begin to understand what's actually happening there. Ukraine is a split country. It's not just a war-torn country. It's split because it borders both Europe and Russia. The western part of Ukraine wants to be identified as a European country, and therefore, of course, they also kind of want to sneak their way into NATO protection. Meanwhile, the eastern part of Ukraine, from everything I've researched, is close to Russia and actually identifies more with Russian culture. And that's really what this war is all about. And I say, as an American who is struggling in this American economy still, I say we remove ourselves from that conflict overall and we let it play out the way that it's going to play out. I don't like seeing President Donald Trump spend too much time on this topic. I know he campaigned on it, but I never believed that campaign promise. Trump is Trump. He's always going to overpromise and overestimate his abilities. And certainly, oftentimes, he comes through. This is not one of those instances, but I think most Americans, except for the Democrats that look for any reason to hate him and try to make him look bad, I actually think most Americans would be okay with President Donald Trump admitting defeat, which he'll never do, but essentially admitting defeat and giving up on Ukraine and Russia. It's time we do that. And not only that, but it's time we actually, like I said, repair our relationship with Russia. What we've done by imposing so many sanctions on Russia and by refusing to trade with them is we've driven them right into the hands of China, which is our true enemy. And Russia and China don't like each other. They never have. They pretend to like each other on a global front, which scares a lot of Americans in other countries, but they don't like each other. And Russia has every reason to not like China. China is a scummy country. They steal the IP, they take advantage of other countries, they use their marketplaces, and they really, really are a bad ally. China is self-obsessed with itself and its own power, and they will use other countries to increase their own power, but they never look out for the best interest of other countries. Putin knows this. Russia knows this collectively, but they're forced to interact with China because we've sanctioned them into oblivion here on the American front over a stupid war. It needs to end. And by ending it, we allow Russia to come back to daddy. Come back to daddy Trump. Come back to America. Work with us instead. It is a far better alternative than allowing Russia to continue its trade and to continue its relationship with China. They don't want to do it. If you enjoyed that clip, be sure to check out my YouTube channel where I have the full video where this clip was taken from published. And if you're America First like I am and you're an American advocate, be sure to subscribe and like the post. Thanks so much for watching.